What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for tuning in to Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Steven Thompson, coming at you with another Inside Pitt practice report. We've got a special, probably slightly longer edition of the practice report today because it was a loaded week. Regular season football is still going on. Plus, we get the first week of men's basketball practice. So there's lots to talk about and there's lots to get through. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the football side of things. I'll deliver a little dose of optimism. I know things don't look too great right now. 1-3. That's not a place the Panthers are used to being, especially under Pat Narduzzi. But I think there are some reasons for optimism, and not just because they're heading to Blacksburg to face a Virginia Tech team that, let's be honest, is not particularly strong. I think there were some encouraging things from the young guys, especially on offense. We've I think a lot of this year's struggles have been older players not exactly living up to expectations or, in a lot of cases getting hurt. But these young guys, I think, are kind of delivering in some big ways. I think especially along the offensive line and at wide receiver. Let's start with the offensive line. If you were me, you arrived. If you were like me, you arrived at game day last week really concerned about the offensive line. You're already down. Ryan Jacoby, Matt Concalves, and Jake Cradle are out. But by all accounts, I thought so up in the press box. And offensive line coach Dave Borbley down on the field, he got the same view. But he thought the offensive line played really well in a lot of ways, especially on the interior, especially considering how many guys that they were missing, and especially against the run. The pass protection leaves a little bit to be desired, but this is a team that's going to lean on the run, going to continue to lean on the run, especially if Christian Veer has to play quarterback on Saturday. We still don't know what the status of Phil Dracovic is. So I'm going to still kind of assume, even with Phil in there, that they are going to lean heavily on the run game. So, it's encouraging that guys like Ryan Jacoby, or excuse me, not Ryan Jacoby, Ryan Baer, and Terrence Moore. Baer started at right tackle. He was kind of the sub in for Goncalves as Branson Taylor moved over to the left tackle, and Terrence Moore was at center for Jake Cradle. So they were really encouraged by the interior of the line. That's B.J. Williams and Jason Collier too. Collier, I think, got the most of the snaps. Borbley said he played probably his best game. Same goes for Blake Zuvovic of the season. So the interior was really solid, especially against the run. Bear, again, pretty good against the run, but left some stuff to be desired in pass protection. Let up a sack, I believe. I think late in the third quarter. I want to say on Veer's second interception. I would have to go back and look, but I think that's something to build on. And I think if nothing else, continuity is the cure to almost every ill with an offensive line. So, it stinks that you kind of have to go through this and you have to deal with these problems, but it's, for as bad as things have been this season, for as tough a spot as the offensive line has been put in, this is a pretty good situation, and I think they showed some encouraging things. I think the same goes for Kenny Johnson. Wide receiver is another position that, for all of the struggles the quarterbacks have gone through, this is a position that hasn't exactly bathed itself in glory either. But Kenny Johnson really showed that he's capable of giving this team a spark and this offensive spark. He returned to kickoff 100 yards for a touchdown against North Carolina. And he hit, I believe, a top speed of 21 miles per hour. He was probably, I think that was the fastest top speed recorded in that game. Saw that going around on Twitter. It came at a crucial moment, and of course, Pitt didn't capitalize it, but I believe it cut the lead to 14 in the second half, I believe, real early in the fourth quarter. So there was still plenty of time for Pitt to get back into it. But yeah, he made a big play at a crucial time and showed why his speed is important and can be really huge for this team. And I think Pitt's starting to realize that. He's starting to get a bigger role in the offense, handoffs, screens, whatnot. And I expect to see more of this in the future. You could kind of see it coming. There's the first move to kick returner, and then there's kind of the step up in the actual offense. If you think about it, like Bub Means has been kind of disappointing, not kind of, like really disappointing after all we heard about him during training camp. Dejon Reynolds hasn't given you very much. I don't know if I was expecting very much, but he's been fine. He's been a third receiver on a not so great offense, and it's pretty much been his role, and he's been pretty okay at that. But outside of Gavin Bartholomew and Kanate Mumfield, there aren't many playmakers on this offense. You could throw Rodney Hammond in there too, and I would No, we won't throw Sebo in there just yet. I like him as a pass catcher, but I think he needs to show a little bit more before we kind of include him in that same stratosphere. But um, they're looking for one more guy, and they're looking for anyone who can really give them a spark. And I think Johnson is one of those guys. This was a kid who came in late. He was a summer arrival, not a spring ball guy, not an early enrollee as a true freshman. So I suspect this was a lot about the playbook. It was, how much can we trust this guy to be a part of the regular offense? We want to make sure that he has all of his, P's and Q's down, that he's not going to be lining up wrong, that he's not going to be a problem for that he's not gonna set the offense back with procedural penalties or small mistakes like that, that he's going to know where he's going. We know I assume they knew the athleticism was there and the playmaking ability was there, but they just had to make sure that, he's gonna be in the right spot. So that will kind of come along with time, and I think that's all it took. I think that's part of the reason why you don't see so many true freshmen actually get to play in college football, period. And so Kenny's just kind of going through, I think, the natural progressions that anyone has to go through in that spot. So I think week by week, you're going to see more and more of this kid on the field. And that's partially because he's going to learn the playbook better, but also partially because they can't really afford to keep him off the field. So that's our football kind of talk for now. We'll have more later this week after we talk to Pat Narduzzi and get ready for kickoff against Virginia Tech. But let's move over to the Peterson Event Center where I was this afternoon for our first kind of meeting with Jeff Capel. We talked to Blake Hinson and Federico as well. They started practices this week, and there was a ton of optimism around this team. And I think it was interesting to walk into that building and talk to those guys. And, obviously the beginning of any season brings optimism and positivity. But especially for this team, which took their licks this offseason, you expected to lose four seniors that were four of your top five leading scorers. But, then Dior Johnson is out. Then Papa Conte suffers a knee injury in the preseason. And even Jorge Diaz-Graham suffered an injury in the preseason. That wasn't very severe, but there was still plenty of optimism around this team. And the more you think about it, there are a lot of ways this team can kind of fall apart and things can go wrong. And I think their ceiling is definitely lower than probably what last year's team was, but there's some talent, and I think there is a reason to believe in the future. They are much younger, but there's two sides to that. They're younger, but I think they're still really talented, and I still think they've got some good pieces. And I think just the story of this season is really going to be guys stepping up into different roles. Think about Blake Hinson. He's the one senior. He's got to be the big leader. He's got to be the vocal guy. He's got to be, as Jeff Gable put it, their best player. And that comes with a lot of responsibility beyond just, hitting some threes and rebounding like he did last year. He has to be better at those things. And he has to add things. And then he has to be an emotional leader. Then he has to be a, talkative leader. He has to be able to put this team in his place and carry on that culture that was so strong that we heard about last year. And then, moving on, there's Zach Austin and Ish Leggett, who have to take a step up in competition in Division One basketball and still, put up similar production and be just as productive. And if in that same vein, be efficient too and play within a system and be with all these talented players. And that's a big ask of them as well. Then you've also got the two freshman guards, Bub Carrington and Jalen Lowe. Those guys are going to play. Like with Dior Johnson not in the picture anymore, those guys are going to play and they are going to handle the ball a ton. They're still kind of looking for out of those two. I would, Ish Leggett's going to handle the ball a little bit, but those two freshman guards, those are one of those guys is your starting point guard for the 2023-24 season. So they're gonna have to break those guys in, and they're gonna have to figure out who's their best option pretty quickly. And without really a ton of lead up time. They get an exhibition against Pitt Johnstown in early November, but then the games get real right after that. So not a lot of lean up time for them. Guillermo and Jorge Diaz-Graham need to be reliable backup bigs. Will Jeffress needs to return and be, their best on-ball defender and needs to find an offensive game. These are all things that we talked to Jeff Capel and he's optimistic that these guys can do these things, of course, but we've got to see it actually play out on the court. And luckily, the actual basketball is a long way off. But we're going to talk to these guys throughout the preseason, and we're going to get to kind of examine these storylines and track them through it's about a month, until actual games start, a little bit more than a month, about 5 weeks, but we're gonna be able to track these all the way through, think them out, flush them out a little bit, and track them a little bit. Some other notes from our talk with Jeff Capel, Blake Hinson, and Federico. Henson down 25 to 30 pounds. That's huge. He's hoping to be a little bit more athletic, expand his game a little bit with that, be better conditioned. And it's all kind of aimed towards a professional career. He obviously tested the NBA draft waters this summer and decided to return to school after getting some feedback from scouts and coaches. The twins, the Diaz Graham twins, each up 20 pounds, a rough give or take. I think it's about 15 for Jorge and maybe closer to 25, 24 for Guillermo if you actually look at the numbers on the roster. But, necessary weight. We talked about it all year. When those guys got thrown into the fire in the postseason, NCAA tournament, and ACC tournament, you could see, they played some games. Think Duke, think Tolu Smith and Mississippi State, where those guys got pushed around at times, and they just don't want that to be the case anymore. We kind of knew that from the jump with those guys. And they've done the work to put on that extra weight, made a sacrifice, didn't try out for their national team in Spain in order to be in the US and put on and do the necessary training and nutrition work to put on that weight. Will Jeffress, I mentioned him. He's back, allegedly much stronger, according to Jeff Capel, fully recovered from his foot injury that kept him out all last season. Like I said, he's got to be a really good defender. That's going to be his calling card, and that's going to be what gets him on the floor. And then what keeps him on the floor is going to be his offensive game. Can he cut enough to create some easy layups? Can he hit open shots? Can he play, good enough basketball? Can he be a threat in some ways? He just hasn't been for most of his career. So we get to, they've talked a lot about his improvements, not just this summer, but the summer before, before he had his foot injury. So we'll get to see how that actually plays out on the court in over the coming month or so. Papa Conte, I mentioned him, freshman center, center forward, big man front court player. He's done for the year, and I just thought it was interesting that uh, Jeff Capel spoke really, really highly of him. Spoke of him as if if he was healthy, he would have a bigger role than I would have expected on this team. He called him their most physical front court player. He's a big, strong kid, and sounds like he plays with a lot of energy as well, and just it's a crowded front court between Guillermo. Jorge's a little bit more of a wing than a big, but obviously Federico as well. So it would have been a tough rotation to crack, but Jeff Capel was really optimistic about this guy, raved about his energy, his passion, his love for his teammates, and everything like that. So, it's one of those things that we can look towards the future, even if it's not, materializing in the short term. But so while there's a lot of attrition for this team over the offseason, the beginning of practices obviously brought a ton of energy and positivity. We'll see where that all leads to. You know, I think the days of them, flopping against a team like the Citadel or St. Francis, those are behind them. But we got to see them do it on the court, and we will see them do it or not on the court on November 6th against North Carolina A&T. But up until then, I'll have all the coverage you need of Pitt basketball and Pitt football as they march through the regular season. With that, I'm headed out of here. Thanks for so much for tuning into another Inside Pitt Practice Report. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@InsideThePanthers, and find all of our reporting from Pitt practices and games. That's football and basketball, like I said, at InsideThePanthers.com. Like I said, stay tuned to us. We're going to have some reporting on football and basketball all the way through the end of this week and then into next. Next week's the bye week for Pitt, but we'll still have plenty of content coming for you. But like I said, thanks for tuning into this video. All next time. Thanks.